Hi, everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis with Forbes Breaking News. Joining me now is Forbes politics reporter Sarah Dorn. Sarah, thanks for coming on.
Hi, Brittany. Thanks so much for having me.
You joined me after a historic day, an unprecedented day, really a chaotic scene that we saw unfolding on the House floor on Tuesday when, for the first time in American history, a House Speaker was ousted, that House Speaker being Kevin McCarthy. You and I have talked about this really delicate dance that Kevin McCarthy has been doing for a while now. He's been in a precarious position since that really fateful speakership vote back in January. So walk us through how we got here starting in January.
Yes, so as we know, it took a historic 15 rounds of voting to elect McCarthy in the first place, largely because Matt Gaetz, who obviously initiated his ouster as Speaker, and about 20 or so other Republican holdouts, refused to vote for McCarthy until he caved to a series of concessions. And one of those concessions ended up, being very consequential and really leading to the demise of his only 269 days as Speaker. And that was a rule change in House rules that allowed just one member of the House to kickstart the process for removing a speaker through what's known as a motion to vacate. And that is what Matt Gaetz filed on Monday. He had a string of grievances that he had raised over the past several months with McCarthy and had repeatedly threatened to do this. But what really, broke the dam was the short-term budget that the House, the Congress passed over the weekend. The House passed this with the support of a number of Democrats, and Gaetz was very upset about this. And not only did it pass with the support of Democrats, but it went against another promise that McCarthy made with these right-wing holdouts during the Speaker's election in January, and that was to pass all appropriations bills for the fiscal year. There are 12 bills that make up what's known as an omnibus package, and McCarthy had agreed, according to Gaetz, to pass each one of those bills separately. And obviously, on Saturday, they passed a short-term budget that continues funding the government for an additional 45 days and averted the government shutdown. So, this was a very chaotic 3 or 4 days in Congress. They only narrowly averted this government shutdown by a few hours, and then that prompted this ousting of McCarthy, which, as you said, was the first time in history that a speaker has ever been removed from his post. And it's the first time that Congress has even voted on ousting a speaker since 1910.
Let's talk about the central characters in this story. Obviously, the first one is Kevin McCarthy, and someone described him to me yesterday as a chameleon, and I think that's the perfect way to describe him. Democrats say they can't trust him. The more of the hard right say they can't trust him. That's what led to his ouster. But he does try to appease both sides here when he can. He worked with Democrats to pass the continuing resolution over the weekend. He also worked with some Republicans to announce an impeachment inquiry, tries to, appease both sides. But he did manage to eke out some victories over the past 9 months. First, he managed to win the leadership battle. It was ugly, but he did manage to get that gavel. Most of us thought he wouldn't be able to. He did come out as the winner in the debt ceiling fight back in June, and he did avert a government shutdown. How he got there, depending on your views, some people are for it, some people are against it, but he did manage to avert that. So what's next for Kevin McCarthy? Is he still a member of the House? Can you help us here figure that out?
Well, I think that him playing chameleon, him playing both sides, is ultimately what led to his demise. With the government shutdown, the budget that they just passed over the weekend, for example, shortly after this was passed, in the hours after, when he was speaking to reporters, he told Gaetz, bring it on, file the motion to vacate. I did the right thing here. I averted a government shutdown. Then the following day, on Sunday, he went on national TV and blasted Democrats and blamed them for bringing, Congress and the government to the brink of a shutdown. So he really angered both sides. And when Democrats met yesterday and made the decision to vote for his ouster, Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries showed them a clip of McCarthy, speaking on TV on Sunday and blaming them for this near shutdown. He was really stuck in a difficult position, backed into a corner with this slim majority in the House. And yes, he is the first speaker to have been, formally ejected from the role, but many speakers before him have resigned, stepped down amid a right-wing revolt, starting with Newt Gingrich and then Paul Ryan, John Boehner. So he was definitely in a very difficult position. And even those legislative victories that you talk about, I know that Jeffries yesterday raised the National Defense Authorization Act that the House passed, and it was packed with a lot of culture war issues and policy changes to the Defense Department that hard right Republicans wanted to see. And this is another thing that really angered Democrats. And in each deal that he has made, both sides have felt like he has gone back on the promises that he's made, both sides, meaning the Democrats and the hard right. So yes, McCarthy is still a member of Congress, and it'll be very interesting to see. The House is in recess for the next week. Lawmakers have returned to their districts. So it'll be very interesting to see what he has to say when they return to the Hill on Tuesday. Other speakers, Boehner immediately resigned from Congress, almost immediately when he stepped down from the speakership. Paul Ryan chose not to run for re-election. So the fate of McCarthy's political career is certainly in limbo.
Matt Gaetz was the one who led this charge. But can we talk about how those Republicans who did defect, there were 8 in total, what persuaded them to do so?
I think that a lot of them they align with the hard right as is. Some of them were among the 20 who voted against McCarthy in his speaker election in January. I know that Nancy Mace, Republican from North Carolina, gave a bit of a different reason. She wanted McCarthy to expand access to birth control, bring legislation to do that, and he did not. So, I think this was an ideological play, and that they're really just trying to say to their base that we are, still committed to these far right principles, and we are going to hold whoever is in power to account, no matter what the consequences are.
Things were getting really heated on the House floor yesterday, and I think something that perfectly encapsulates that temperature is after the ouster vote, Representative Patrick McHenry had the gavel and he slammed it to the point it looked like his wrist could have been broken. He couldn't not have slammed that gavel harder, and that really, spoke to the moment. That moment did go viral. So what are the implications here of the GOP?
I mean, the GOP is really in turmoil. I heard one lawmaker refer to them. I can't remember who it was. It is at this point, but he called them 8 selfish assholes who voted, to remove McCarthy. So it's lots of fiery quotes. People are very angry. The majority of the conference has expressed a lot of anger at the 8 defectors. There's threats to boot them from their various caucuses. Within the Republican conference, there's a number of ideological groups who make up the party, and the members who voted against McCarthy are facing threats to remove them. Newt Gingrich, who, as I mentioned, was pushed out of his position as speaker in the 90s, has called for them to be primaried. So, Yes, a lot of turmoil within the Republican Party, and obviously there's a leadership shakeup underway and a forthcoming speaker election, which I'm sure we'll talk about. So.
We will talk about that in a second, but I do obviously want to talk about the implications for 2024 here. We're a little over a year out from a presidential election. And what's the root of the divide here? Is it policy or is it leadership and is it personal? Because the fight between Gaetz and McCarthy seemed personal.
It did seem personal, and there hasn't really been definitive reporting, I would say, proving that it was. Gaetz has denied that it was personal. Now, Gaetz has also reportedly upset at McCarthy for allowing a House ethics investigation into the allegations, the sex trafficking allegations against him, which, there was a criminal probe. Those charges were dropped. So that is one issue between the two. I think it's interesting that the former president did not really take sides on this over the weekend. He said that he likes both Gaetz and McCarthy. Gaetz claimed that he felt Trump would be happy with the decision. Trump denied that today. So yes, it is a possibility that these 8 members could be primaried, and I'm sure that will come up in a campaign if they are. But I think overall, they know, they understand their bases and their districts, and at the end of the day, that's the reason that any lawmaker casts a vote. And you have to understand that this is why they did that. They believe that their base would feel like this is the right decision, and that McCarthy did not push the policies that their voters want to see in place. So yes, I think that overall, though, it'll be interesting to see when polling comes out how the American public feels about this, and how has it changed their views of the Republican Party, and do people ultimately blame Trump for this turmoil and sowing this division, and could it hurt him in the election next year?
Let's talk about the Donald Trump of it all. I think a fact that people have found surprising is that you do not need to be a member of Congress to be the Speaker of the House. So that means the name Donald Trump has been floated to take the position. What's the likelihood of that happening, and has Donald Trump responded?
The likelihood is slim to none. I think that yes, someone will probably nominate him, as they did during the January speaker's race. Gaetz voted for him. However, there is a new a new factor since January that could prevent him from being speaker, and that is that the House GOP conference rules state that any member of leadership is required to step aside if they have been indicted. Obviously, Trump is currently facing 91 criminal counts against him. So just from a plain reading of those rules, he would not be eligible to become speaker. But I do expect for him to be nominated. Texas Republican Troy Nehls has said that he plans to nominate him. Marjorie Taylor Greene, Georgia, Greg Stube of Florida have said that they support that. And Trump did not rule out the prospect when asked about it today by reporters. But I also think logistically that would be very difficult. The speaker needs to be at the Capitol every single day. And, Trump is running a presidential campaign and also facing 4 criminal cases and 1 civil fraud trial. So, yes, like I said, slim to none that he will actually become speaker, but it's certainly an interesting soundbite.
As you mentioned, the Speaker of the House position really does seem like a thankless job. Newt Gingrich, John Boehner, Paul Ryan all didn't have these rosy exits. So as we sit here on Wednesday afternoon, Jim Jordan, chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, did say he is throwing his hat in the ring. He's going to try his hand at becoming House Speaker. But are there any other names being floated to succeed Kevin McCarthy?
Yes, and there's going to be an entire leadership shakeup because many of the names being floated are already members of leadership, so someone will need to replace them as well. Jim Jordan is the first person to formally announce his candidacy. He chairs the Judiciary Committee. He is a staunch backer of former President Trump, has been really leading the charge along with James Comer into many of these investigations into the Biden impeachment inquiry, et cetera. So aside from Jim Jordan, Steve Scalise, who is the majority leader, his name is being floated, and he is expected to announce his candidacy today. And there are lots of reports that he is already making calls, to recruit members to vote for him. One kink in that is Scalise has just been diagnosed with blood cancer. He said recently that it was a very treatable cancer, but that is something that's being discussed and whether he's the best candidate for the job. And then there is also Tom Emmer, who is a member of leadership. He is also reportedly making calls. All three of these names that we just mentioned did support McCarthy yesterday. They were not among the 8 who voted against him. But yes, it's going to be a very crowded race, and it remains to be seen if they will, change the House rules and how they will negotiate with Gaetz and the Republicans who voted against McCarthy to, will this be a repeat of January when they have to agree to a number of concessions? And if whoever is elected speaker next, if they don't change the rule to allow just one member to bring a motion to vacate, we could very quickly be back in this same position, given, that Gaetz and this far right coalition has really flexed their muscles and shown that they do hold power in this 118th Congress, and they're not afraid to use it.
There are a lot of moving parts here. And as things shake out, I hope you come back on and join us and provide all your insights, all your reporting. Sarah Doran, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you, Brittany.